Hey, this is Patrick Rady, and I'll be your host for your Basketball and Bourbon podcast. For the next hour, we'll share stories involving two of my greatest passions, basketball and bourbon. Sit back and enjoy stories shared from people who have good old-fashioned experiences from the hardwood and the barrel. As we like to say on the show here, cheers to the round ball and the barrel. Today's show is sponsored by Kentucky Peerless, makers of the fine bourbon and rye whiskey, located in the heart of Louisville, Kentucky on Bourbon Row. Visit them at KentuckyPeerless.com and sign up for a distillery tour today. Our other sponsor is Rustic Barrel Company. Rustic Barrel Company specializes in selling custom handmade rustic products. They also have bourbon and wine barrels available for purchase or rent. Visit them at rusticbarrelco.com or like them on Facebook at Rustic Barrel Co. All right, welcome to episode 5 of the Basketball and Bourbon podcast. Today our guest is Dan Dakich. Dan is the host of weekday talk shows Don't At Me from 9 to 11 on the Outkick Network, and hosts the award-winning Dan Dakich Show on 1070 The Fan in Indianapolis, Indiana. Dan, welcome to the Basketball and Bourbon podcast.
Hey, I had the bourbon, and it was great. Friend of mine played golf Friday, and we got back to my house. My wife was gone. We sat on the back deck. We poured ourselves a glass, put a little cube in it, poured ourselves another glass, and it was terrific. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Hopefully, Corky, the owner at the distillery there at Kentucky Peerless, you're hearing that, and we have another satisfied customer there. Basketball has been a big part of your life as a player, coach, and analyst. When did you start thinking that it would be a career choice for you?
That's a great question. When I was a kid, like most kids, probably like you played every sport. I knew football wasn't it because when I played football, CYO football, I always liked Mondays better than any practice day. And you know what? Mondays were the day off. So I always realized, like, hey, wait a second. I like this better. Basketball and baseball, I just fell in love with. I couldn't wait, Pat, to get home from school or wake up in the morning and just go to our driveway. We had a little concrete driveway that the corner jump shot was probably 4 feet maybe, and the top of the key was about 10 feet. You couldn't even shoot a free throw, but that was I hung there all day, man, and I couldn't wait. I loved it, totally, completely fell in love with it, and I never thought, I nobody from my high school had ever been recruited to play Division I basketball. No, our high school had won one sectional in its history, so it wasn't like there was a ton of you know people, but I loved it, and probably my junior year, about halfway through, when I started getting letters from people, I thought that I could, maybe play in college somewhere. And then, after Coach Knight offered me an opportunity to be a grad assistant, and I liked that. So I don't know if I ever really said, hey, there's a moment, but I do know I was in love with the game and still in love with the game.
And that's kind of how it was, like you said, just growing up. I don't you think kids miss the opportunity today? And I get, we live in a crazy country, and I get it and everything, but just to go outside and make up your own games, whether it's home run derby or wiffle ball or, different shots in basketball, and we played. I just think these last few generations of kids have missed that.
Oh man, Pat, it makes my wife and I nuts, and it used to make my son and my daughter nuts because every time we drove by, a baseball field, I always say, and how is there not a baseball game there? How is there not a football game there? If there was a backstop in a park or if there was a grassy field, I'm like, how are guys not playing? And because I mean, I didn't grow up with an AAU. I'm glad I didn't either. I'm glad I didn't grow up being coached year round. I didn't grow up with any of that. I mean, in the summertime, we played Little League Baseball. In the fall, you played football or, stayed after school to play basketball or. So I always said this. My son and all his buddies, when we lived in Bowling Green, did that. They were always out playing. They were always in somebody's driveway. They were always in someone's backyard. And I, I always said this about he knew how to play better than guys that were 8 zillion times more athletic than him that had personal trainers. And just because he got out there and he played and they set their own rules and they made their own arguments. And but yeah, I think so much of that is missing. Pat, it's funny. The other day, again, a friend of mine, a doctor from Bowling Green, we get home, we get to my place after we're playing golf, and he's over there on the couch, and I'm over here, and we're watching Ohio State football game. And I looked over, and Pat, I swear to God, it was the first time in 5 years that I looked over and someone on my couch wasn't on their phone. He doesn't have social media. He's not, he's just watching the game. And I'm like, Doc, this is so weird to see somebody's just watching a freaking game. Not, and myself included, I'm on Twitter, I'm on whatever. I'm trying. It was cool. It made me think how much, we miss having our heads in phones, man. It's crazy.
Absolutely. And, you know, we grew up, I think, similar. Your parents or your dad was a administrator, a teacher. My dad was a teacher, and so I think those family values you got from just the blue collar type workers that was education back then, not this modern education. But you had a family motto, the Dakich family motto, that was called "Sack Up." Can you describe that to our listeners? The importance of this motto for you growing up?
Well, I mean, things are going to happen that aren't good, like sack up. I mean, not that we're insensitive to something, we're loving and caring and all that, but basically, well, okay, well, so what? I mean, let's go. My parents, both of them were teachers, as you mentioned, like, your dad. And, there was no missing school because you didn't feel good. I tried every Sunday night, for crying out loud. I didn't like school. I still didn't like school, but you're hurt. Are you hurt or are you, sack up? Again, it sounds harsh. People are going to be mean to you. So what? Sack up. Guys, your name is Dakich. It rhymes with Dickich. It rhymes with Jockich. It rhymes with all kind of things. Shut up. Quit whining. So that's kind of what it is. And, it's really funny. My daughter is not sports oriented at all. She was in a high-end dance group, and she was a terrific competition dancer and all that, but not involved in sports. And I swear to God, my 25-year-old daughter says sack up to people more than anybody. She is my school teacher right now in Nashville, Tennessee. So my son, sack up. Hey, he would say to me, I know, Dad, he's a walk-on at Michigan at one point and got a chance to play a little bit and got, pulled out of the game for something he didn't think. And he came to me to kind of complain. And I looked at him and I'll never forget. He goes, I know, sack up. You're right. You're right. I go, I didn't even say it, but so it's just kind of our thing. It's our reminder that not everything's going to go perfect. You're going to have hardships. So keep going, keep striving.
And I absolutely love it. And I had this later. Let's go ahead and go to it now. I remember watching your son Andrew play. They were playing in the same high school tournament that my high school team was playing. And when you're not playing, they'll go 2 or 3 games, and I just was walking around different courts, and I hear this voice, and I'm walking, and it's your son playing for Zionsville, and he's talking. I mean, it's to me as a coach, it was the most beautiful thing that I could see. And I'm like trying to tell my kid, like, watch, this is how you talk on defense. This is how you talk on offense. This is how a leader is. And at that point, I just had a feeling that he would make a great coach, that he would be destined to coach.
Well, today's his first day at Illinois State as an official full-time coach. He's been on staffs, but he's never, how the difference is, Pat. You got different levels, grad assistant, film guy, director of ops. Now he's full-time, and he's really fired up. The advantage, and this, your dad, obviously a Hall of Fame, legendary coach, and I'm sure you went to practice, and when he was at Bowling Green in practice, he was smart. I mean, he saw who talked, who didn't, the importance of talking. We had some really good teams when he was little, and the two guys that really led the team, both were Player of the Year in the MAC. They were talkative guys. So, I'm sure your dad did this. We always probably beat into our kids when you're coaching, and you did this. I'm sure. You want them to see the good things that are happening in a practice, and you harp on,
Absolutely. Yep.
right. You're like, hey, did you see how much Jimmy spoke today? Did you see how everybody sprinted back? They didn't jog back on defense, and obviously, Andrew picked up on stuff, not necessarily because of me, just because he was there. You sit there and you watch, and if you're smart and you really love it, like he did, you did, I did, your dad did, you pick up stuff. You're not sitting there half asleep. You're excited. I always said this. When I was a kid growing up, man, the high school basketball players were my idols. Like I wasn't around any college basketball players. If I was around a college basketball player, I might have crapped myself because you know I remember getting a chance with my dad in the Gary Regional. It was one class. You played in the morning, and you played in the morning session, then the night session. And I would always go with my dad, and we would go to Coney King on about, I don't know, 50th or 40th and Broadway in Gary, and everybody went there. High school coaches went there, and I was sitting there in awe. I was always in awe of high school coaches. I was always in awe of high school players because there was no college players, in Northwest Indiana. They were all at school, but if you love it, you sit there, you learn, you pick up stuff, and I'm proud of Andrew because I think he is going to be. I think he is a terrific coach. He certainly cares about players, cares about learning, and cares about education. So I'm happy with him.
Hey, and I'm excited, and I will be Illinois State fan. Coach Peden, he recruited one of my players at Cloverdale when he was assistant at Butler. So I really, really like that staff.
Yeah, he's a great guy, and um, I, again, I give Andrew some credit. He was just at Ohio State 1 year. He played as a fifth year, and they thought enough of him to keep him on the staff. Mike Schrage was an assistant there. Went to Elon. Thought enough of him to take him there, and then, when Ryan Peden got the job, thought enough of him to bring him. So, unlike most Dakiches, I think he's a pretty likable guy, and I think everything, I think it's all right.
Hey, I like you, Coach, and it's must. I definitely record your shows every day, or go back and watch them. So it's one of the highlights of my days, to tell you. So you said you looked up to the high school players. I did as well. And I can remember the first time I got hooked on basketball. I was 5 years old. It was 1974-75 season. My dad's team was playing in the Huntington tournament, one of those holiday tournaments. They had just beaten Muncie North and Sammy Drummer in the morning. And so my mom, I could tell her saying, hey, the game's almost coming up. We're listening to the radio. They play Hammond, and they were ranked #1, and they had a star named Rick Valavicius. And Winchester won 69-68. I could just remember at that point, I said, I want to be a part of this, for the rest of my life. Do you remember that team?
Oh, I mean, that Rich Valavicius was one of my idols. I can remember the entire team. The year before, they had a guy named Larry Moore, who became a longtime high school coach. Larry made the Indiana All-Star team. They had a kid named Randall that came into Andrean and dunked at a time when dunking was not allowed. Rich Valavicius was one of my idols. My father was the analyst on WWCA, High School Game of the Week, with a man named Frank Saline, and I used to go. And Rich Valavicius and Hammond High, they were the deal, man. I mean, they were, to me, like I said, Valavicius was my idol. And I'll never forget when we were seniors at Andrean, we were maybe in the top 5, and Hammond High, maybe we were 4th, and Hammond High was 5th. And we had to play them in the first round or second round of the sectional at Hammond. And I remember thinking to myself, man, I don't know if I used the word ironic. I probably wasn't that smart, but I remember just thinking how weird it was that here, really, basketball for me started with Pete Turgovich and the guys from East Chicago, Washington, Rick, Stoddard, Turgovich, Junior Bridgman, Darnell Adell. But as I got older and I patterned my game after somebody, it was Valavicius.
Wow.
And not the other guys, because the other guy, they had a kid named Brian Banks who went to Nebraska and ended up maybe as their all-time leading scorer. So, man, I remember those guys. And you know what? Whenever I went to a game, this is how I knew I loved basketball. Whenever I went to a high school game, kicking it along with my dad, wherever they went, I always had to go home. And if it was too late, then I shot baskets into a cardboard thing not a Nerf hoop, but like a Nerf hoop that I put on my wall because I had to play. I got so excited about watching the game, I had to go home and play. Man, Rick Valavicius, Pete Turgovich. My dad was a high school principal at Calumet, and I'll never forget it. 1973, 74. I'm never good with those years, but they won the sectional. And I'll never forget as a little kid, it was at Calumet, huge gym they had. And my dad got on the mic and announced that school was canceled on Monday because they had won the sectional. Like, could you imagine doing that now, man? Every parent would be up in arms. I mean, the school board would fire you. It was unbelievable. And everybody came to my house in Maryville. All the students came to our house, and Calumet was a melting pot school. You had black, you had white. The only thing you didn't have was rich, and they all TP'd our house. They brought pizzas. Dudes are hanging out on the lawn. Thought they won the freaking NCAA tournament, right? It was one of the coolest nights ever. And I'll never forget my dad saying, and oh, by the way, no school Monday. And crazy, man. Crazy.
And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to start this podcast. And, it's not to necessarily get critical or other thinking, but it's just to talk about the basketball that we fell in love with and just some of the great stories and that out there. And I can always remember my dad talking about the region, and he never thought they got the credit that they deserved. And he was fortunate in his career. He coached against some of those teams. He coached against Coach Barato and said it in Hammond and those. He said he never felt like they got the fair shake. And he always felt that sometimes the whistle just didn't go their way in the tournament as well.
Yeah, I'll tell you, we got screwed. They tried to screw us at Andre, and actually, it's so funny, that's always the reputation. And for me, it started when Gary Westside in 1972, I believe it was, went down to Bloomington. And the motto in the region was, we may lose the game, but we're going to win the fight. And Connorsville beat Westside. And I was a little kid, and I remember, man, there was like gunshots and fights. And Westside actually got banned for a year from sports. I don't know if it's just basketball or all sports. So everybody in the region will tell you, hey, man, once you get to Lafayette, for the semi-state, you better be a heck of a lot better than who you're playing against. That was always the thing. I think I found out of one high school basketball game my entire life, and it was in the semi-state my senior year in the against Brownsburg, and a kid, Mark Atkinson, that played at Purdue. And I'm like, what the hell is that foul? It was like, hey, we let you go to the state finals the year before, but we ain't letting you guys, go twice. But to your point, Pat, I always made fun of Alford. I'm like, Newcastle and Lafayette Jeff, you guys are so full of crap. Like, you put all these sectional and regional championships up, right? Well, you play them at home. You got to beat Blue Frickin' River. In Lafayette's case, you got to beat like Southeastern, High at your own place. I said, we're playing first round game against number 5 team in the state, Hammond High. And then, oh, by the way, if you win that, you got to go play Hammond Tech. And then you go play Gary Roosevelt. And then you go play Gary Westside at Gary Westside. I'm like, damn. And it still, to this day, makes the people at Lafayette Jeff mad because, Pat, I always say we went to the state finals in 1980. And I swear to God, this is true. The worst team that we played in the run won 2 or 3 games in the sectional, beat Hammond Knoll and Lou Wallace in the regional. Then we had to beat Carmel in the first game of the Sweet 16, and then we played Lafayette Jeff. And I swear to you, Pat, the winner that goes to the state finals. By far the worst team we played was Lafayette Jeff. And all these banners are hanging up there. I'm like, you guys get the whistle. You play at home. You don't even have to. You don't even have to leave Lafayette. You don't even have to leave Lafayette to go to the state finals. Are you crazy? Nuts, nuts.
So I was always educated. So I have much respect for the region and the basketball. Just I guess because of my upbringing, and that was one of the things I was just always loved. Tournament time, high school basketball when it was one class. I still like it now, obviously coaching and everything, but it was different. It was something special back then. And so that 1980 was it 1980 that you were in the Final Four, right? High school.
Yeah.
That was a wild day. That was Stacy Turan threw that 3/4 length shot in, right?
Yeah, I tell people that if you can find a better afternoon, we were just a small Catholic school. Jimmy Bullock, myself, and we were all friends, and we weren't ranked. None of us had ever played varsity before. Next thing you know, we're 20-1, 22-1, 24-1, 25-1, and we're down 15, Pat. And this is how you know guys are good friends. So we get down one. We make a huge run against New Albany, who was #1 team in the state. Make a huge run. 4 seconds to go. 5 seconds. They're shooting a free throw. We're down one. They miss. My friend Mike Paulson gets the ball. I'm sprinting down ahead of him, screaming for the ball. I was on fire in the second half. He pulls up, takes a shot, misses, gets fouled. Now, you know how Market Square was, right? I mean, for the first game in the morning, the second half is packed because all the teams are. Marion's there now. Broad Ripple's there now. The place is a zoo. And Mike goes up to the free throw line, and if he makes one, we go to overtime, and we're rolling now. Makes two, we win. Misses, we lose. He misses, and it's terrible, right? I mean, he's getting letters from Priest, Coach Knight, Digger Phelps, Kate. I mean, across the country, people have seen this, and so fast forward, Mike becomes a CEO and made $1 zillion, and he's uber successful. And he came to play golf. He comes every year. We go meet up. A bunch of us play golf. And swear to God, Pat, every time he misses a putt, we always look and we go, just like 1980. You still can't come through in the clutch, man. Just like 1980. Nothing's changed, Mike. What the, you know what I mean? It's like, so, great afternoon, great memories, and you're good enough friends to say that to somebody. You're pretty good. You got friends for life if you can say that stuff.
Absolutely, and I had that down to talk to you. So let's go ahead now. What's it? Obviously, I look and I think it was that post when you guys were playing golf with some of your guys that you were played baseball and basketball with at Andrean. What was the special bond? Because for our listeners, if you've never been in a locker room or you never play, it's not always that way. Guys don't always get along during the season or on a team. So what made that bond so special that it's so strong that it's still here today?
It's interesting. Everybody on that team just wanted to win. Like I was a junior. Jimmy Bullock, who was a great player at Purdue, he was a junior. Our center, Ray Goff, was a junior. Seniors were the guards, and they didn't care. Like hey, look, they just want to win. Kevin Page and Mike Paulson, the kid that I talked about, are the two best teammates that I have ever played with. I've never played with guys that did not care. And you know how it is. I mean, the next year we had a really good team, but we had a couple guards that were looking to get scholarships, and we got to the semi-state final, but it wasn't the same. But we Kevin, myself, Buzzy, and a bunch of us all went to grade school together. Jimmy came over. I think he got cut from Gary Roosevelt High School, so he came to Andrean. Next thing you know, he's a freaking All-American at Purdue. The guard, everybody on the team just wanted to win. And, Pat, I try to tell people, and I did a good job of this initially as a coach at Bowling Green. Then I did a bad job. Initially, I was really big into fit, and I used that 80 team as an example. I wanted guys, that just wanted to win, right? And we won more than Bowling Green had won. And then I did a dumb thing. I went and said, well, we got to get more talented to take the next step. And I paid more attention to ability than I did as fit, and it didn't work out nearly as well. But sometimes you catch lightning in a bottle with just a group of guys where there's no ego, there's only winning. Nobody's a pain. Nobody's getting in trouble. No one's late for practice. No one says a word to the coach. Nothing. You just showed up. If Jimmy Bullock's picture was in the paper, great. And if mine was, great. If Kevin, and I think now it's really hard for kids because the reaction from others to being in the paper or to being a quote, you know, I'm the guy that has more followers, and next it's just harder. For us it was, hey, we play. Nobody in the school expected it, so we come in. Maybe there was an article in the paper. The nuns were mad at you if you screwed up, and next thing you know, you played the next game. So I just think it's so much different now, and it's so much harder to keep egos in check. And I think parents don't help. Like, I seriously never had a problem with a parent at Bowling Green. I never did, because I was very clear. And I based that on, there was never an issue. I mean, never. As I went through being at Indiana or as I was in high school, never a parental issue. Even as a coach at Indiana, like, there was never anybody that, you know, a guy might transfer and the dad might get mad after the fact, but there was never any. And I was really lucky. And it started in junior year in high school where there was literally no ego.
You said something there, and I love it. Just that word "win," and I think we've lost it in society. We've lost it in this country. We've lost it, to me, in schools. Win the day. Win, And I'm a Pete Rose fan, and I know he has a lot of faults, but I love the way he played, and I love that he came to win. And I read something that I thought was probably one of the best things, if you're a player, that coach could say about you, and it was Sparky Anderson he said, Peter Edward, every time you walk through that door, I knew you were here to win.
Yeah. And look, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, so,
Right.
how do people become billionaires? Yeah, some of them become billionaires by inheriting, but the majority of it figure out how to win, whether it's a business deal, whether it's a race, it doesn't matter. And I don't think at all that there's anything wrong with it. Like, I always say this, I text the guy at ESPN who's the head of radio, because the show ahead of mine, I think, stinks. It's good when Greeny's on, but these guys that they have on it. So I'll text them and I'll say this, Pat. I'll say, look, I'm trying to win every day here on 107.5 The Fan. I'm trying to win. I'm trying to win with the Outkick show. I'm trying to win if I'm playing golf. I'm trying to, and there's not a damn thing wrong with that. My father warned me, and this literally almost happened. My father always said, if you ever lose, you might die. He goes, and I'm like, well, I don't know. He goes, no, you might. And I'm like, okay. Well, when I was at Bowling Green, I went to West Virginia, came back, and I had my three best players hurt for 4 of the 5 years. So I'm playing with football players, and I got real depression, Pat. I got to where I couldn't get my head off the pillow. Like, I always get a kick out of it when people say, well, Michael Jordan's the most competitive human being alive. Well, that may be true, but I always say, man, I knew a lot of dudes at Indiana like myself. I couldn't touch the rim. I had one leg smaller than the other. I almost died at birth. I had a bone disease that kept me out for an entire year, but somehow, some way, I got to play at the best college, I think, basketball program during its time. Now, you got to be uber stupid, crazy competitive to do that. Like, Pat, losing Now, I finally came to grips with it. It was almost a mental illness with me. I don't care if I was in sixth grade and we ran laps. I had to win. I don't care if it was junior high and we had a volleyball game. I had to win. I don't care if I was 27 years old and I was playing golf. I had to win. I didn't act like an idiot when we didn't. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and I think that it's okay. Like, what the hell? Men are supposed to be competitive. Men are supposed to be hunters. Men aren't supposed to be jackasses. Men are supposed to be protectors. We're not supposed to be soft and lazy, and I don't think we're supposed to be effeminate. I'm not saying we're supposed to be jackasses, but I don't think we're supposed to. I think we're supposed to be men, for crying out loud. And part of being a man, I think, is a desire to win. Others can argue. So I tell you what, Pat, it drives me nuts how winning isn't that important. It's part of who men are. The vast, 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 vast majority of men. Hey, if that's not who you are, then great. But don't besmirch those of us, the vast majority of us, that is who we are. And I think we're getting away from that, and I don't think it's for the good.
I agree 100%, and I'm in public education, and I think we're guilty of it, and a lot of it is things that can't be controlled by teachers, but at the end of the day, we are producing a society that thinks that, okay, well, they're more of an entitlement than go get it. I want this, I want to win. And then that's
Pat, I don't know how you were, but I was always afraid. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I was always afraid of having to move back to Northwest Indiana and work in a damn steel mill. I was. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, I watched my uncle, I watched my cousins, I watched my neighbors working in a steel mill, and there's nothing wrong with working in a steel mill. But my thing was, you know what? I got a break. I got I got lucky. I got lucky that God gave me the ability to compete and to love a sport that got me to a position where, unless I get lazy, unless I get stupid, unless I get addicted or whatever, I'm not going to take advantage of the opportunities that I got. So I was always afraid of failure, like I still am. I'm 60 years old and I'm trying to convince myself, hey, look, it's all right. But I think a lot of that is gone. I think a lot of people feel like, well, mom and dad will take care of me. The government will take care of me. Somebody will take care of me. I never wanted anybody to take care of me. I always looked at, man, I got this opportunity. I better take advantage of it. And if I don't take advantage of it, two things are going to happen. One, I'm going to have to go back and do something I really don't want to do. And more importantly, the second thing, Pat, is that I'm going to have to live with myself knowing that I didn't take advantage of certain opportunities. Look, I wish I was the head coach of whatever on my 10th national championship. That didn't happen, but I don't regret any of it because I know what I gave to it. That's fine. Failure. Hey, look, if people want to look at it that way, but I couldn't, and I don't think people do anymore, Pat. I don't think people. I think everybody is looking. Not everybody, but I think too many people are looking for a way out, looking for an excuse, and thinking that they have a lifeline that may or may not be there.
I can see it. I see it on a daily basis. Unfortunately, that's the sad thing. And I can remember just kind of like what you were saying. I didn't like school. I didn't really want to go, but I can remember, my dad said, well, you love basketball. You're not going to get, you're not going to be able to coach. You're not going to be able to teach if you don't get things going. He goes, but if you want to be a bum, then you go be a bum. And he said,
yeah.
And he goes, but you're not going to be a bum at my house. And people look at, well, your dad was mean. Well, that fear of being a bum, what he told me, and I don't even know if you can say that word anymore, but I get it. That's what drove me to make sure I got my degree.
No, I agree. I didn't like school either, and I think as kids of kids whose parents are teachers, I think you either become like a dude that loves school or a dude that doesn't. And I was one of those that didn't. I'll never forget this. I drank. First time I drank, I got home and I knew my mom knew. I felt guilty because I got Catholic guilt, and I had to work the next day. my dad's driving me to work. I was like 15 or 16, and I knew that he knew, and Catholic guilt was eating me up. And I go, Dad, I got to tell you, I had a couple beers last night. And he looked at me, and I thought, all right, I'm dead. He goes, well, very simple. He goes, if you want to be a basketball player, you're not going to do that. If you don't want to be a basketball player, then you're going to do that. I can't make you do either way. But if you want to be one of the, if you want to be a basketball player, you won't do it. And I'll never forget looking at him, going, all right, yeah, you're right. And and then as you move through high school, you see so many kids that are talented that screw themselves up with those kind of things, and you still see it now. So, look, I'm not saying that parents should be abusive. I'm not advocating for any of that.
Absolutely.
But there
Yeah.
ain't a damn thing wrong. Yeah, there ain't a damn thing wrong with somebody holding you accountable and holding it accountable in a way that you don't like it. Pat, it's funny. I had a guy named O.J. Anderson on my show today. O.J. Anderson was the most valuable player in Super Bowl 25. He's a running back. And I asked him about Bill Parcells, and I said, look, what made Parcells great? And you know what he said? He said, fear. I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, Parcell made it such that you thought you could lose your job if you fumbled. You thought you could be demoted. You thought you might get cut if you didn't set a block. He goes, I said, could you coach that way today? He goes, oh, heck no, you couldn't do that. You couldn't coach by way of fear. But that, it was just interesting to me. I don't think there's anything wrong with it, but you know what? You and I will be called old and stupid, and we just don't understand. And the truth of the matter is, we're the only society in the world that doesn't respect guys like you and me that are older, that have been through some things, that actually just might have a little knowledge, just a little bit, based on our experience, Pat. I don't know, maybe just, a little bit, we could help somebody if they'd shut the hell up and listen.
Exactly. I had Jeff. I don't know if you know Jeff Strom, who was assistant with Rick Majerus at Utah, and he's from Marshall, Illinois. So Marshall's really close to Terre Haute. So we've been friends or family friends for some time. And I was asking him because he recruited Hano Metala, Bogert, and some of the foreign guys there in that time when Majerus was winning with some international players. And I asked him what was the difference. How did they come? And he said there was a coach that came over to the United States. And he said, when have you guys become this soft? And I guess like they still have 3-4 hour practices. They'll still get in a kid's face. And we wonder why the MVPs, the last 3 MVPs, have been international players.
Let me tell you something. Like, my roommate in college was Uwe Blob, and from an academic standpoint, he's like, "What are you guys?" He goes, Dan, I went to Effingham. I knew this stuff in high school from like second grade. Uh, the thing about the look, one of the things that we get hurt by is instant gratification / no patience. Like, you look at guys that come over, and now they're being young, now they're younger and younger and younger. But when you look at a guy named like Jokic, so Jokic is in Serbia or wherever he's at, and he's practicing, and this is a guy who worked him a long time. It was 8 to 10 hours a day. It was not a practice; it was a job. And credit their federation for figuring out who the best players are and putting them in a position. It was obviously, they wanted them in the NBA, but they wanted them on their national teams. Basketball was a priority. But it was like Reggie Miller. I remember Greg Graham. I sent Greg Graham,
Yes.
Coach Knight and I did, to work out with Reggie Miller. And I'll never forget Greg coming back. They worked out at NIFS, downtown Indy, National Institute of Fitness and Sports, or Sports and Fitness. And he's like, damn, Reggie Miller brings a lunch. It's an 8-hour day. He bikes for a while, he runs, he shoots, he goes, blah, blah. And that's what kids are doing now. Hell, if a coach has too many practices, somebody's whining at him. If a coach doesn't let them off for whatever, it's, I feel lucky to have played in an era where that wasn't an issue. And I feel really lucky as I look back to have played or coached kids whose parents were like, "Hey, man, I don't care." Like, I'll tell you a story. So I had a really good point guard. We were 24 and 6, 5, whatever. His name was Brandon Pardon. And Brandon is one of my favorites, still is. His son's going to be a really good player, Jackson, up in Fort Wayne area. So Brandon, he was the kind of kid, you know how it goes, Pat, you can mess with, right? So Bowling Green, the basket was here and the doors were right behind it. There was no bleachers behind the one side. There was on the other. I said, Brandon, you throw the ball away one more time. I go, hey, man, you're going to have to run around the building in your uniform. Pat, it was snowing. It was knee deep. He throws it away and he goes back to set up. I go, no, go, go. It's a freaking blizzard out. He goes, go. I go, go. So he goes and he runs around the thing, right? Comes back in. All right, whatever. Practice is over. So, Pat, swear to God, the next day we're practicing. Maybe it was a Sunday. And I look in the bleachers and there's his dad. And you know what I'm thinking, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, here we go, right? As soon as Brandon saw me look up in the bleachers, he comes running over. Coach, no. He just wants to see the start of practice. I go, don't you lie to me. I go, do I go have a conversation about making you run? No, coach, no, which was great. Nowadays, I'd be fired, shot, put in jail, civil suit, and next thing you know, I'm under a bridge.
And I bet he didn't turn it over in a big game.
Not. Absolutely not. That's right.
So we talk about coaching and winning and losing, and we're obviously both competitive guys. Now, my daughter played volleyball, and I'm going to tell you, as a parent, I got more nervous watching her play than I did coaching my own team. You know, what was it like for you watching Andrew play? You know, being a coach, you know, and all that, and being able to have control in that.
Same thing. High school, you'd sit there, and my first game at Zionsville, one of the senior parents stood up in the middle of the crowd. He's a lawyer, still in his business suit, and made an ass of himself yelling at a referee. And I remember looking, going, man, that ain't never going to be me. But it was like an ulcer inside. You know what I mean? As you well know.
Yes.
Like, and then at Ohio State or Michigan, all of a sudden social media is a big deal. You're at a big time program. As a walk on, everybody thinks that they're better than him to begin with. People think that, well, because your dad was an ESPN announcer, you got an opportunity. So I knew if he ever screwed up, he would be crushed on social media. Now, at Michigan, he played more than I ever anticipated. He's actually in the rotation his last year, and then he gets a scholarship to Ohio State for a fifth year. And Pat, I got to tell you, man, he's playing 20 minutes a game on a team that's 15-3 in the Big Ten. And I swear to God, I needed to wear a diaper to every game. I'm not kidding you, man. I'd wear a hat so no one can, I'd wear a scarf and keep my coat on. And I was dying because, look, number one, you don't want your son to screw up, right? I mean, or your daughter, right? You don't want that. And then you add on to it the national, what's the right word, like hate that you get on social media.
Absolutely, yes, yeah.
And I look, I always thought, well, if he faces it, he faces it. At least he's here. But you don't want that for your kid, you know. Pat, I died inside when I watched my daughter dance, and I didn't know nothing about it. But I got to the point where I could tell a wobble. I could tell, I studied it a little bit because I liked it. But I died, Pat. I mean, I died. Now I have a stepdaughter who plays third base at Harvard, and we go to every game that we can, weekend games, and I die for her. Every strike, I'm like, oh, I don't say nothing. Nobody can ever accuse me of saying anything, but it's like, Pat, it's like You just die, man. You die, no question.
Yes, my daughter plays volleyball, so there's been a couple times where she's got the serve. It's 24-24. My wife's going, "Oh my gosh," and she's one of the best servers that her team have. But you're just like, don't hit the net, and don't hit it out.
I'm telling you.
Oh,
I didn't feel that when I was coaching Andrew in AAU. I didn't have any of that because you're coaching and you think I thought was pretty good about thinking of him as just a player. But damn, when I became just a fan, I didn't like it. I didn't like it at all.
I I tell you. So one of the things we do here on the show is I'm going to ask you, what would your bourbon starting five be?
Pat, I don't know enough.
Okay,
I know Blanton's. I really like Blanton's.
that's my favorite.
That's my favorite.
Yep.
Give me names of other bourbons and I can tell you.
Woodford.
Woodford is number 2. Woodford, I got 8 bottles sent to me by a rich guy that listens to my show. I like Woodford a lot. Is Maker's a bourbon?
Maker's Mark is a bourbon, yeah.
That's number 3. I like Maker's.
And you got the Jim Beam family. Knob Creek's pretty good, and that's kind of a.
What's Angel's Envy?
Angel's Envy is really good. Yes, yeah.
I like Angel's Envy.
And then there's I don't know if you've ever had Elijah Craig. It's fairly.
I like Elijah Craig. Damn, I drink more bourbon than I thought. My wife's ex-husband sells it. He sells Angel's Envy.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So we've got Angel's Envy here because we have a weird dynamic. Like he stays at our house. We're all friends. It's no, they got divorced years ago, and his son and daughter lived with us. So what are we gonna do? Make him stay in a hotel? So he'd stay in the basement. But yeah, Jim would bring Angel's Envy.
Yeah,
I like all those, but Blanton's my favorite.
That's my favorite. Have you ever been on a distillery tour?
No, but I tell you this: I went on a wine tour and I was hammered. I can only imagine a distillery tour, Pat. Pat, here's the problem. You are a classy gentleman.
I don't know.
I am a D's, Dem, and Doe's region guy that grew up drinking Falstaff, Strohs, and Hams. So when I drink bourbon or I drink a mixed drink or I drink wine, I drink it as fast as I drink freaking beer. It's all the same speed, and that is not good, Pat. That is not good at all.
People ask me why I drink it neat, and it's not because I'm a tough guy or anything. It's because if I put it over ice, I drink it too quick, and then I become, a jackleg, as my wife would tell me. But we need to go on a distillery tour together. That'd be a bucket list of mine.
I'm in. I need somebody that knows. I'll tell you this: I always drink it neat, and I'll tell you why. Not that I'm, I don't think I'm George Clooney or anything like that. I like the taste of it.
Yes.
I don't like watered down anything. Like if I could drink, like I put little beer mugs in my refrigerator, and I'm addicted to A&W Zero. No sugar A&W. So instead of putting ice in it, I've got these frosted mugs because I don't like anything watered down. If it's watered down, if I'm gonna drink a Diet Coke and I like the taste of Diet Coke, I don't need it watered down. And same thing with bourbon. Now, if I'm gonna drink vodka and I put it with lemonade, whatever, but with bourbon, I gotta have it neat, 2 fingers, and then we figure out how to get home later.
That's right, yeah. And sometimes you got to go the Boyd Crowder. You ever see the movie or the TV show Justified?
No.
Okay, it's there was a character on there, Boyd Crowder, and he would say 4 fingers. He would come in of Elmer T. Lee, which is made by the same Buffalo Trace, which makes Blanton's.
I've got some of that.
Wow.
I've got Buffalo Trace. I've got that. I got all kind of that. I'll tell you something about 4 fingers. First day I'm going out dating my current wife. I get divorced. Long story. we're going to meet up after talking on the phone. It's up at Notre Dame. She's coaching Syracuse, and I drive up. Pat, swear to God, she's getting ready. I get there. I have 2 fingers. She texts down, hey, it's going to be a few more minutes. I have 2 more fingers. Pat, it's all makers too. I have 8 fingers by the time she's down there. First time we're meeting up, and Pat, I'm like, hey, I'm embarrassed, but you got to drive. Like, you know what I mean?
Hey. Oh my! And the other thing I like about bourbon is you mentioned zero sugar. No sugars, no carbs. So, and unfortunately, if I could put away the chocolate chip cookies and the ice cream and that kind of stuff, um, I
No
remember
sugar,
what.
no hangover.
No hangover, exactly. I still remember a show you talked about. You could eat a whole row of Oreos, and I'm like, "That's my guy," because that's what I do. My wife will say, "Who ate a whole row?" I go, "That was me."
Pat, I ate my Pat. True story. My current wife dumped me when we were dating. You know, it's long distance relationship. She dumps me. So I'm like, all right. So it was a nice day. Cubs were on. I sat on my couch and I opened up a 24 pack of, you know what dreamsicles are?
Yes, yeah, yeah.
Pat, I ate 17 dreamsicles sitting there in one sitting. Finally, I'm like, this is gross. You know, I get a hold of yourself. But I get it, brother. I I totally get it.
All right. Well, one of the last things I want to talk to you about before we end the show today is I always liked watching a game that you were an analyst in. You were able to articulate what was going on in the game, and thus, to me, it created a more educated fan. And I think fans like that. Why do you think so many of the analysts today are so vanilla with their analytical analysis of the game?
Well, I always say this, Pat. If you haven't coached, you know, you really don't know. Like, and I
Mm-mm.
say this from experience. Like, you know, I'll never forget how different the game was for me once I coached for a couple years. And then I'll never forget how different the game was when I became a head coach. I think right now the move is to have so many younger guys that were players. And I just don't
Mm.
think, number one, they're afraid to criticize anybody. Number two, I just don't think that they understand the depth of what they're seeing. I really don't. Like when I watch an analyst, I'm not going to lie. I don't. I mean, I think Seth and Fran Frischella are great, but other than that, I don't. I don't really pay attention. In fact, this past year, I just turned the sound down and I was reading books. You know, watching the game. I did not think. I think former coaches are afraid to. They always want to get back into coaching. Like I remember when ESPN hired me, they said, "Do you want to get back into coaching?" I go, "No, I don't. I like what I'm doing." And they're well, and I became the only guy, at least according to them, that was had strong opinions and was critical. But I just don't think. I think players don't know, and they're afraid to criticize. And I know, you know, coaches, particularly guys that just got fired, that you know they don't want to criticize because they might want another job.
Yeah. And once again, that goes back to, you know, back in the day, I can remember, guy that would motivate guys if somebody told you that you didn't play well, that would make you want to prove either that person wrong or, hey, maybe I need to look in the mirror. And now it just seems like they want to complain about it, or their parents want to get on social media and complain about it.
Pat, when the biggest compliment I would get would be when a coach told me, "Hey, we used what you said and showed a player." There was a kid from Gary named Brendan Dawson who played at Michigan State, and they showed him something that I said, and he broke his hand. He punched the table, and you know, to me, that's the biggest compliment that an announcer can get. Now, that's me. That may not be some other guys, but that's how I looked at it. I looked at it. I remember Urban Meyer, when he retired the first time, he was going into broadcast and he called me up. He goes, "What do you do?" I go, I just act as if I'm coaching the game, meaning I
Mm.
study, I scout it, and then I talk about it like I'm talking, to a group that I'm explaining the game to. But again, everybody's got their own style. I just really liked when a coach would call me and say, "Hey, Dan, that was really good. I showed it to so and so, or I showed that clip to our team." I think that's the biggest compliment.
Hey, and believe me, there was a couple times that I took clips from what you were saying and shared it with my team. So last thing, I recently retired from coaching. Right now, I'm happy. My wife thinks I've aged 10 years. I'm 10 years younger. What do you miss most about coaching? But and what's the one thing that you don't miss?
I hate to put it this way. This makes me sound. The only thing I miss is winning. There's nothing like winning when you're a player. Like, I really believe that. There's nothing like it. There's the second would be winning as a coach. I don't miss any part of it. In fact, um, it was interesting. I wondered when I got out and I made a decision. I had some job offers after Indiana, and I thought, you know what? Let's see what happens. Radio thing was good. Big Ten Network ended up hiring me, and I got to coach my kids. And Pat, I couldn't believe that there was a whole world out there because, as a coach, you're so tunnel vision. Like,
Absolutely.
it's so much about you and the team. And then I'll never forget this, Pat. Thanksgiving, my first year out of coaching. It was, what would it have been, 2008 Thanksgiving. I'm at my sister-in-law with my brother, my mom, my dad, my wife, my kids. Everybody's there. And Pat, I swear to God, I didn't know Thanksgiving was like this. I had never in my life had a Thanksgiving where, wait, whoa, 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 we're going to eat. Now, wait a second. What are we going to do now? We're going to sit. Wait, we're going to do what now? Watch football, watch basketball. It was the great. And then we went to a high school game like on that Friday. I think it was Brebeuf against Zionsville, actually. And I remember thinking, oh man, it's fun to sit here and not give a rat's. You know what I mean? Because as a coach, you go to a high school game, you're scouting the high school game,
Right.
right? You're getting ready for the next game. So I swear, Pat, the only thing that I miss, you never get the feeling back of winning. But other than that, I don't miss any of it, particularly with NIL and transfer and all that stuff. I've learned there's a whole life out there that I'm enjoying the heck out of.
And that's kind of where we, on a smaller scale, obviously in Indiana, we don't have to worry about some of that other stuff. But I'm looking forward to getting to enjoy a Thanksgiving, a Christmas, and not playing on December 26th. And so I think I'm looking forward to it.
It'll be interesting for you because when I left Bowling Green, I was at the Final Four. And Florida's playing in the Final Four. And Urban Meyer texted me. He said, "Hey, I got two seats right behind the bench. Come on, sit with me." So I go down, sit with him for the Final Four. And he and his defensive coordinator, a guy named Charlie Strong, they're texting recruits. They're working. And I thought then, Pat, I'm like, I got to get back to this. I got to. I
Mm-hmm.
got to get. I got to get back to the Division One highest level. Sampson hires me, and then I become the interim coach. And then by the time that was done, I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I think I'm good. And it's funny. I wasn't ready to do what I said, enjoy Thanksgiving or not
Mm-hmm.
do it then. But then 1 year later, and it wasn't because of anything that happened in Indiana. I mean, hell, it is what it is. But your mentality can change. And once I saw what life was really about outside of being so consumed and so insane about winning and recruiting and making sure everything's done right and blah, 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 great life. You'll have a great life without coaching. I guarantee it.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to it. And Dan, I can't thank you enough for taking time to be on this show and helping me to kind of, start this new journey in my life outside of coaching, and for you to come on for somebody that, one, I looked up to as a coach. I had your motion video, and I always loved watching you at practice, whether you were assistant in Indiana or never got a chance to go over to Bowling Green, but would see you, and you always had time for me. And that's not always the case, but I want to thank you for that. And I enjoy listening. And once again, tune in 9 to 11 daily on Don't At Me and 1070 The Fan from noon to 3. But Coach, thank you.
Pat, I can't thank you enough, man. I got to know you through your dad. Your dad was always freaking awesome, whether it was Steve Hart, Brian Evans, whoever. And good luck. I'm here to help, man. Anything you need. And I want to go on a bourbon trail with somebody that actually knows. So there you go, brother.
That's a bucket list for me. So hey, thank you so much. And that's a wrap on episode 5. We thank Dan Dakich from Don't At Me and the Dan Dakich Show. As we say on the Basketball and Bourbon podcast, cheers to the round ball in the barrel. Until next week.